The Heart and Mind is very grateful to welcome Marianne Williamson to the Heart and Mind family. Marianne Williamson is a best-selling author, nonprofit, and political activist and spiritual thought leader. For over 3 decades, Marianne has been a leader in spiritual and religiosity progressive circles. She is the author of 14 books, 4 of which have been New York Times bestsellers. A quote from the mega bestseller, A Return to Love. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure, is considered an anthem for a contemporary generation of seekers. Williamson founded Project Angel Food, a nonprofit that has delivered more than 12 million meals to ill and dying homebound patients since 1989. The group was created to help people suffering from the ravages of HIV and AIDS. She also worked throughout her career on poverty, anti-hunger, and racial reconciliation issues. She has advocated for reparations for slavery since the 1990s and was the first candidate in the 2020 presidential primary season to make it a pillar of her campaign. In 2004, she co-founded the Peace Alliance and supports the creation of the U.S. Department of Peace. In addition, she advocates for a cabinet-level Department of Children and Youth to adequately address the chronic trauma of millions of American children. Marianne is a native of Houston, Texas. Thank you so much for joining us, Marianne. We're very grateful to have you. And we're very grateful to hear your wisdom and your story on resilience as we are facing a crisis as a human family. And you've been speaking for many decades now to the heart of the human family and to the soul of the human family. And we would love to hear any pearls of wisdom and any rays of light that you can shine into our homes today about how to overcome what we're going through with coronavirus.
Conversations that all of us are having within our own minds and hearts, with our own families, and as a culture in such situations as this one are extremely important, because there are many conversations of fear, and it's important that they be countered with conversations that replace that fear. I am not someone who, after 9/11, was deeply surprised, shocked, of course, horrified, of course. But I have been writing and saying for a long time, as I believe have many people, that as a country and as a species, we have been way off course. You talked about talking into the heart and soul of people. Yes, I have been talking into the heart and soul of people. Many people have been talking into the heart and soul of people. But the geopolitical and economic realities of certainly of Western civilization and most of human civilization have not been guided by the realities of heart and soul. They have been guided by the realities of the mind, when far too often is separated from heart, separated from soul, which means separated from conscience, separated from empathy, separated from reverence. And so while there has been a, I believe, profound emergence, and what you are doing here is an example, there has now become a mainstream impulse, a conversation around heart and soul. But too often, the desire and the aspirations for more heart in the world and more soul have been peripheral to the places where the heart and soul are most damaged. So we all like to talk about heart and soul, that's great. Meanwhile, we don't really want to take on necessarily, because it would be inconvenient and messy, the realities of what oil and gas are doing to destroy indigenous cultures in some other part of the world. We want to talk about heart and soul, but we don't necessarily want to go there because it would be inconvenient and messy to actually talk about the fact that for the sale of $360 billion in arms sale, the United States has given aerial support to a genocidal war in Yemen where tens of thousands of people have died, including so many children. Now, when I said earlier that I was as horrified as everybody else after 9/11, but not deeply, deeply in my soul shocked, I feel the same way now. We don't know exactly where the virus originated. We don't know if it originated in a wet market. We don't know if it originated in a lab. But in terms of consciousness, we know where it originated. It originated in a place where we lack reverence. There was some lack of reverence to people. There was some lack of reverence for animals. There was some lack of reverence for the earth. And lack of reverence is the malignity that now threatens the survival of the human race. Just as a cell in the body actualizes and reaches its highest level of manifestation in its collaboration with other cells to serve the healthy function of the organ and the organism of which they're part, a cell that disconnects from that collaborative matrix and goes off to do its own thing, that's cancer. And that is a malignancy not only in the body, but also in consciousness. And that is what has happened to the human race. We have been infected by a malignant consciousness, a consciousness which is the thought that really it's all about me, separate from other people, separate from the earth, separate from the animals. That means we have separated ourselves from the ultimately creative and collaborative matrix, which is whatever you want to call it. You could call it the will of God. You could call it the way of nature. For me, these are all the same things. Now, in the Course in Miracles, it says something very interesting. It says many things that are interesting, but one thing it talks about is the exercise of free will. We are free. We can think with love, with reverence, compassion, with empathy. We can act with love, reverence, compassion, and empathy. But we don't have to. We're free. In every moment, we make a choice. We either make it consciously or we make it unconsciously. But every moment, we make a choice, whether to have an open-hearted response to life or a closed-hearted response to life. However, there is a skeleton that forms the structure of the universe. In the East, it's called karma. In the West, it's called cause and effect. And it is such that whatever choice we make, there will be an effect. You choose love, things are going to basically work out. You choose lack of love or fear, defensiveness, attack, anger, destruction, chaos will ensue. Now, there's a line in the Course in Miracles where it says, there is a limit beyond which the Son of God cannot miscreate. What that means is you can act without reverence all you want. You can organize your society in a way that takes care of a few at the expense of the many all you want. But there will come a time, if you go too much and too far in that direction, where it will simply stop working. And that's what's happened. The whole socioeconomic, political structure that we were led to believe, although the most observant among us did not believe, was so strong, was a house of cards. And the whole thing is like a building that was built on piles, wooden piles, and the wooden piles have rotted. And that's because they lacked empathy and they lacked moral authority and they lacked any sense that what matters most is people, planet, and animals. It's ours to decide what to do now. But through the fact that the universe, the mind of God, whatever you want to call it, is infinitely merciful, we do have the opportunity to change all this. But in order to change all this, we're going to have to change our minds. And we're going to have to refuse to engage in the places where the darkness is the most powerful. Because in terms of our personal lives, a lot more people in this country and on this planet love than hate. I believe that. I think the average person does do everything that we can to live lives of character and integrity and compassion and conscience. I believe that. I think we're decently good people. The problem, as I said before, is that our public policy is not guided by those things. And as long as we disengage from politics, as long as we think that that's just uncool and it's toxic, of course it's toxic. It's toxic because the people who are holding the most enlightened aspirational principles aren't dealing with it. It's like if you have a broken arm and you go to the doctor's not going to say, well, that looks kind of icky. Let's look at your leg instead. You know, the light workers, people talk about being light workers. You're not here to be a light worker just to hang out in the light while the darkness gets larger and larger. We're here to be light workers in order to go, as we are assigned to go, into the realms of darkness in order to stand for the alternative, in order to shed the light. And in every single area, we have the people who are pointing the way. We have the people who know what to do to create a sustainable environment. We have people who know what to do to save children. We have people who know what to do to rebuild, to reinvent our structures, our societies. But we have a government that does more to advocate for and to fund the problem creators than the problem solvers. Because the problem creators are represented by huge multinational corporate entities who see their only responsibility as fiduciary financial responsibility to their stockholders, even if that is at the expense of ethical and moral responsibility to people or to planet. That will change if we change it. And it will not change if we do not change it. And that mentality, which is a sociopathic mentality. Sociopaths are people who have no empathy. It's all just about them getting what they want, but there's no real empathy for other people. Well, this is an amoral economic system. It's not an immoral economic system. People don't wake up in the morning in charge of these huge industries and say, oh, how can I hurt a child today? Or how can I hurt an indigenous tribe today? That's not where they live in their hearts. And individually, they might be very lovely people. It's just that they wake up every day and they do not think it is their responsibility to care about what happened to indigenous tribes or whatever. And then because those huge forces, for all intents and purposes, basically control our government today because of the extraordinary amount of money that they can wield on the process, we are living in a world where if you don't already have, it's becoming increasingly difficult to survive. And if you do already have, governments work on behalf of your getting even more. Now, whether you see this in ethical terms, religious terms, spiritual terms, just personal terms, this is immoral. And there's a limit beyond which the Son of God cannot miscreate. So the rabbi who spoke before me mentioned that this was the time in which all of us can reinvent. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. I heard Sister Jenna say that this is a period of forced global pause. I know as an American, this has certainly rocked us to our core, but we needed to be rocked. We needed to see how little our government cares in the way it operates. Anybody who didn't see that sees that now. Because the same system which led us to the place where we would be so incredibly vulnerable to this virus once it came to our shores in ways that most people, I think, didn't think we would be. That same mentality is guiding how we are dealing with it now that it's here. It's horrible to think about this. It's upsetting and it's depressing. But you know what? Sometimes the fact that you're upset is a sign of mental health. People call it if somebody has a mental illness or a mental issue. No. The mental illness and the mental issue is the way we have been living as a civilization on this planet. People who find it very, very difficult to live within that, they don't have a mental problem. They have a mental structure that's working very, very well, and all the lights are going off. When you have a broken leg, you feel physical pain. Why? Because it's the brain. Evolution has made it so that the brain registers the pain, because if the pain wasn't there, you wouldn't know you have to reset that leg. And the same with psychic pain. It is there for a reason. And so all the people that we've been saying, oh, they have a mental issue. No, 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 no. They have actually a well-functioning psyche. And it's blaring red lights. And those red lights have been going on for a while. We can't take an endless number of cascading calamities. The species will not survive. And we have been skating on very thin ice, not just in relation to pandemics, also in relation to nuclear power. And we're all like, la-di-da. We've been skating on very thin ice in terms of the environment. Not that people have been going la-di-da, but the forces that would rape and misuse the environment are unfortunately still pretty much winning. Now, when we were children, we learned about evolution, and we learned that if a species is behaving in ways that are maladaptive for its survival, that one of two things is going to happen. The species will either mutate and evolve in another direction, or it will go extinct. And it's only the most magical thinking which would lead us to believe that somehow that couldn't happen to us. And my hope is that we transform adequately. And I think we are, actually. I know as an American, we've had very big problems before. We had slavery, but then we had abolition. We had the institutionalized suppression of women, and we had women's suffrage. We had the institutionalized white supremacy in the American South, and then we had the civil rights movement. So we are not the first generation to have to face some very, very serious problems. But as I said, we've had some serious problems, and we ourselves, life is not just about what happens to you. Life is about who you choose to be in the space of what happens to you. And we have not been mature enough. We haven't been conscious enough. We haven't been attentive enough. And now we are. I've said for a very long time, no matter what the public issue is, it will make its way to your private door. Good luck with all that green juice and gluten-free when they're poisoning the air. So now our opportunity is to atone in our hearts. In Catholicism, there's confession. In Judaism, the day of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, is the holiest day of the year. In Alcoholics Anonymous, you have to admit the exact nature of your character defects. It's time for us to do that, to recognize we let things get like this. Anybody says, well, I didn't really, because unless you have been a passionate activist, we've been chronically disengaged in too many cases from things that matter most. But I've seen in my work for decades, when people are told that they, let's say, have a life-challenging illness, I've seen how much ultimately unimportant preoccupation just falls away in the first 5 or 10 minutes. And that's where I think we are. There's a seriousness in the air that can translate into a new maturity. And that's what we need. In my country, we've had a prolonged post-adolescence. No more girls acting, and no more women acting like girls, no more men acting like boys. It's really time for us to, I believe, realize that the challenge, as big as any that has faced any other generation, is now ours. However, while it's very important to identify our problems, let's identify with the problem solvers. And as we atone and we commit to making amends, that's the issue. The world will change when we decide to change it. And it can't just be changing on the level of symptom. It has to be on the level of cause. And sometimes you don't know what to do, but that's not the first thing you need to know. What you need to know from a spiritual perspective is I am available to be a vessel for that change. Just like cells are assigned. Some cells are assigned to the pancreas, some cells are assigned to the lungs. All of us are assigned. Some of us are assigned to business, some of us are assigned to sciences, some of us are assigned to education, some of us are assigned to art, and politics is our collective assignment. If we're willing to say, I am willing, there's a line in the Course in Miracles where it says, your good intentions are not enough. Your willingness is everything. So it seems huge because it is. But there are huge changes going on inside of us. You've got to have a big hole in the ground before you can have a high building. We are pregnant, as it were. Something is being born in the womb of our consciousness. It's gestating. We're pregnant. A new world is being born inside us. This is a huge reset and a huge opportunity. We know that the Chinese character for crisis, right? Danger and opportunity. So we have to sit with it. Rilke said, let me not squander the hour of my pain. I think that's what's most important now. Let us not squander this hour of our pain. Let's not avoid the changes that it's working inside us. Let's not avoid the grief for what was and really will never quite be the same again. But also let's not avoid celebrating the possibilities that I believe will unfold in a way that they would not have unfolded had something this profound not come upon us. So we can't ask God to take away the effect if we're not willing to surrender the cause. So the dark night of the soul will be followed by a new morning. But what the weather will be during that morning is completely up to us. Thank you.
Very much, Marianne. Thank you very much, Marianne, for your powerful message on the process of the phoenix and also on social responsibility.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
She can't hear me. Thank you for your powerful message on the phoenix process and also on social responsibility and how those two things are very closely connected. And in the way that everything is perfect, your message about our decisions and how they impact communities and nations and people all over the world is preceding a group of mamos, which are the elders and guardians from the Sierras in Colombia, and they're going to share about some of the things that are happening there. So thank you for knowing that and listening and allowing that to come through you. And we really look forward to continuing to support you and continuing to connect and share your beautiful message.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
She is incredible.